texted the wrong number, but the billionaire who replied changed her life forever. The glow of Ruth Martinez's phone screen illuminated her face in the darkness of her cramped studio apartment. Her fingers trembled as she typed out the message, tears streaming down her cheeks. It was 2:47 a.m., and she had finally worked up the courage to text Michael, her boyfriend of 3 years, to tell him she knew about the affair. She hit send without double-checking the number. Before we begin the beautiful story, please subscribe, it's free, and it makes my day 100% better. Also like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comment section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family. Amen. Let's begin. What Ruth didn't know was that her tears, her rage, and her heartbreak had just been delivered to the phone of Albert James, a 34-year-old billionaire sitting in his penthouse office overlooking the Manhattan skyline, nursing a glass of whiskey while reviewing acquisition reports that would determine the fate of thousands of employees. Albert stared at the message that had just appeared on his phone. I know what you did. I know about her. 3 years, Michael. 3 years. And you threw it all away for someone you met at a conference? I gave you everything. I believed in us. I can't believe I was so stupid. I hope she was worth destroying me. Albert James had received many texts in his life, business proposals worth millions, threats from competitors, even the occasional romantic overture from women who discovered his private number. But never had he received something so raw, so devastatingly human. For a man who had spent the last decade building an empire on calculated decisions and emotional distance, this misdirected message of pain pierced through his carefully constructed armor. He should have ignored it. He should have blocked the number. He should have returned to his reports. Instead, Albert James did something he would later recognize as the moment his life changed forever. He replied, I think you have the wrong number. But whoever Michael is, he's an idiot. Ruth was pacing her apartment, sobbing into her hands, when her phone buzzed. She grabbed it, expecting Michael's excuses, his lies, his gaslighting. Instead, she saw a message from an unknown number. Her number, the one she'd meant to text Michael, except she'd apparently switched the last 2 digits in her fury. She stared at the response. Then she read it again. Despite everything, despite the crushing weight of betrayal, despite the way her chest felt like it was caving in, she felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Just barely. The smallest hint of a smile in the darkness. She typed back, Great. So I can't even send a breakup text correctly. That's just perfect. Sorry for bothering you. Albert looked at his phone, then at the whiskey in his glass. He had a board meeting in 5 hours. He had a merger to finalize. He had no business continuing this conversation. He typed, If it makes you feel better, I once signed a $50 million contract with a typo that cost my company $2 million in legal fees. We all make mistakes. Ruth actually laughed, a short, broken sound that echoed in her empty apartment. She wiped her eyes and typed back, That does make me feel slightly better. Though I think a typo in a breakup text is somehow more pathetic than a typo in a business deal. Different kinds of pain, Albert wrote. Different kinds of loss. Neither one is pathetic. For the next hour, Ruth Martinez, a 28-year-old social worker struggling to make ends meet in Brooklyn, and Albert James, a billionaire whose face regularly appeared in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, had a conversation that neither of them expected. Ruth told him about Michael, about the 3 years she'd invested in a relationship built on lies, about how she'd worked 2 jobs to support them while he finished his MBA, about how she'd found out about the affair not from him, but from a coworker who'd seen him with another woman at a restaurant Ruth could never afford to eat at. Albert told her things he'd never told anyone, about the loneliness of success, about how he'd built an empire but couldn't remember the last time he'd had a conversation that wasn't transactional, about his own failed engagement 5 years ago to a woman who'd loved his money more than she'd ever loved him. As the sun began to rise over New York City, Albert looked at his phone and realized he'd missed his board meeting. He'd ignored 17 calls from his assistant. He'd completely abandoned the merger documents that required his signature. And he didn't care. Thank you, Ruth typed. I don't know who you are, mysterious wrong number stranger, but you made the worst night of my life bearable. Albert stared at those words for a long. My name is Albert, he typed. Albert James. And I'd like to buy you coffee. Properly. Not as a wrong number, but as someone who'd like to know you better. Ruth's fingers froze over her phone. She typed his name into Google, and her entire world tilted. Albert James, founder and CEO of James Tech Industries. Net worth, $8.7 billion. Named one of the most influential tech entrepreneurs under 40 by Time magazine. Bachelor. Philanthropist. Investor. She looked around her studio apartment, at the water stain on the ceiling, at the second-hand furniture, at the stack of bills on her counter marked Final Notice. This had to be a joke. Or a scam. Or... Her phone buzzed again. I know what you're thinking. You Googled me. You're looking at your phone right now wondering if this is real or if some creepy person is catfishing you using a billionaire's name. It's really me. And I'd really like to meet you.
No expectations. No obligations.
Just coffee. Then another message. Here's my verified social media account. I'll post a picture in the next 60 seconds holding up 3 fingers. Check it. Ruth's hand shook as she navigated to his verified Instagram account, 14.2 million followers. She refreshed the page. A new story appeared. Albert James in his office, the Manhattan skyline behind him, holding up 3 fingers with a slight smile on his face. It was real. This was actually happening. Okay, she typed back. Coffee. But I'm buying. I'm not a charity case. I wouldn't dream of suggesting you were, Albert replied. Name the place. I'll be there. 3 days later, Ruth stood outside a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, checking her reflection in the window for the 100th time. She'd chosen her best outfit, a simple but elegant dress she'd found at a thrift store, paired with the only nice shoes she owned. She felt ridiculous. What was she even doing? A black car pulled up to the curb, not a limousine, thankfully, but still clearly expensive. The back door opened, and Albert James stepped out. He looked exactly like his photos, yet somehow different. More real. More human. He wore a simple black suit without a tie, and when he saw her, his face broke into a genuine smile that made Ruth's heart skip a beat. Ruth, he said, and the way he said her name, like it mattered, like she mattered, made her forget for a moment that this man was worth more than she would earn in 1,000 lifetimes. Albert, she replied, extending her hand. He took it, and the warmth of his grip sent electricity through her entire body. They sat in the corner of the coffee shop, Ruth's choice, her territory, her rules, and for 2 hours, they talked. They talked about everything and nothing. About Ruth's work with at-risk youth, about Albert's latest venture into renewable energy, about their childhoods, Ruth growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Queens with immigrant parents who sacrificed everything for her education, Albert growing up in foster care after his parents died in a car accident when he was 7. I built everything from nothing, Albert said quietly, staring into his coffee. Every dollar, every company, every success, it all came from a terrified 7-year-old boy who swore he'd never be helpless again. Never be dependent on anyone again. Never be vulnerable again. Ruth reached across the table and placed her hand on his. And yet here you are, having coffee with a stranger who sent you a misdirected breakup text at 2:47 in the morning. That seems pretty vulnerable to me. Albert looked up at her, and in his eyes, Ruth saw something she'd never expected to see in a billionaire's gaze. Gratitude. Real, genuine gratitude. You're not what I expected, he said. Neither are you, Ruth replied. As they left the coffee shop, Albert turned to her. Can I see you again? Yes, Ruth said without hesitation. But I have rules. Albert raised an eyebrow. Rules? I'm not interested in being your charity project. I'm not interested in your money. If we are going to do this, whatever this is, we do it as equals. You don't pay my bills. You don't buy me expensive gifts. You don't try to rescue me from my life. Understood? For the first time in years, Albert James felt something he'd almost forgotten. Respect. Not the obligatory respect people showed him because of his wealth, but genuine respect for someone who saw him as a person, not a bank account. Understood, he said. Though I should warn you, I'm very competitive. Asking me not to try to impress you is going to be extremely difficult. Ruth laughed. Try impressing me with who you are, not what you have. Deal, Albert said, extending his hand. Ruth shook it. Deal. Neither of them realized that a photographer from a celebrity gossip website had been sitting 3 tables away, capturing every moment of their conversation. By that evening, Ruth's photo was plastered across the internet with the headline, "Billionaire Albert James spotted on coffee date with mystery woman. Who is she?" And that's when Ruth Martinez's carefully constructed life began to unravel in ways she never could have anticipated. Ruth's phone started ringing at 7:32 p.m. First it was her best friend Jessica, screaming into the phone about seeing her face on TMZ. Then her mother, panicking in Spanish about strangers calling their house. Then her boss at the youth center, asking if she needed to take some time off given the situation. What situation? Ruth had barely registered what was happening when her phone buzzed with a text from Albert. "I'm so sorry. I should have warned you. Are you okay?" She was sitting on her bed, scrolling through article after article, seeing her face paired with increasingly dramatic headlines. Who is Ruth Martinez? The woman who captured billionaire Albert James's heart. From wrong number to right match? The unlikely romance taking the internet by storm. Albert James finally found love, and you won't believe how they met. The comments were even worse. Thousands of strangers were dissecting her appearance, her clothes, her background, making assumptions about her character and her intentions. She's obviously a gold digger. She's pretty, but not that pretty. What does he see in her? I bet she planned this whole wrong number thing. Nobody is that lucky by accident. She looks poor. He's definitely just slumming it for publicity. Ruth felt sick. She'd gone from invisible to infamous in a matter of hours, and she hadn't asked for any of it. Her phone rang. Albert's name appeared on the screen. "Hello." Her voice was smaller than she'd intended. "Ruth, I'm downstairs. Can I come up? We need to talk." 10 minutes later, Albert James was standing in her studio apartment, the first time he'd seen where she lived. She watched his eyes take in the cramped space, the water-stained ceiling, the second-hand furniture. She waited for judgment, for pity, for the inevitable realization that they were from different worlds and this had been a mistake. Instead, Albert said, "Your home is lovely. It feels real. Lived in. Mine feels like a museum." Ruth couldn't help but laugh, though it came out bitter. "You don't have to pretend, Albert. I've seen your penthouse in magazines. I know what your world looks like." "That's not my world," Albert said quietly. "That's where I sleep. There's a difference." He moved closer to her. "Ruth, I'm sorry. I should have prepared you for this. I should have warned you that my life comes with complications." Complications. Ruth gestured to her phone, still buzzing with notifications. "Albert, there are thousands of people out there calling me a gold digger, a social climber, a..." She stopped, her voice breaking. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted coffee with someone who made me feel less alone." "I know," Albert said, "and I'm offering you an out. Right now. Walk away, and I'll make sure this dies down. I'll have my PR team release a statement saying we are just friends, nothing more. Within a week, they'll move on to the next story. You can go back to your life. I'll go back to mine. No harm, no foul." Ruth looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd stayed up all night texting a heartbroken stranger. At the man who'd shown up at a Brooklyn coffee shop instead of sending an assistant. At the man who was standing in her tiny apartment and calling it lovely instead of inadequate. "And if I don't want to walk away?" she asked quietly. Albert's expression shifted into something intense, something almost desperate. "Then I'll hire you the best PR team money can buy. I'll protect you from this circus as much as I can. I'll..." "No," Ruth interrupted. "No PR team. No protection. If we are doing this, we do it on my terms, remember? I'm not hiding. I'm not being managed. I'm just me. And if the world has a problem with that, that's their problem, not mine." Albert stared at her. Then, slowly, he smiled. "You're incredible, do you know that?" "I'm terrified," Ruth admitted. "But I'm also tired of making decisions based on fear. Michael had me so convinced that I wasn't enough, that I needed to be grateful for whatever scraps of affection he threw my way. I'm done living like that. I'm done making myself smaller so other people feel bigger." "You could never be small," Albert said. "You're the biggest person I've ever met." That night, they ordered takeout. Ruth insisted on splitting the cost, and sat on her floor eating Chinese food while Albert told her stories about his life that had never made it into any magazine. About the foster homes where he'd learned to be invisible. About the first business he'd started at 15, buying broken electronics from pawn shops and fixing them to resell. About the loneliness of success, the way every new $1 billion felt more isolating than the last. "Money solves a lot of problems," Albert said quietly, "but it creates new ones. You never know who wants you for you, and who wants you for what you can give them. You never know if people are laughing at your jokes because they're funny, or because you're the one signing their paychecks. You never know if a woman is kissing you because she loves you, or because she loves your penthouse and your car and your ability to buy her things she could never afford on her own." "Is that what happened with your ex-fiancée?" Ruth asked gently. Albert nodded. "Veronica. We dated for 2 years. I thought she was different. I thought she saw me, not just my money. Then one day, I came home early from a business trip and overheard her on the phone with a friend. She was laughing about how she'd hooked the biggest fish in the ocean, and how she just had to play the part for a few more months until we were married and she could secure her future. Every moment we'd shared, every I love you, every intimate night together, it had all been a performance. She'd been acting the whole time." "I'm sorry," Ruth said. That's cruel." "It taught me to trust my instincts," Albert replied. "And my instincts tell me that you're real. That what I feel when I'm with you is real. That for the first time in 5 years, I'm not wondering if someone has an agenda." Ruth set down her chopsticks. "Albert, I need to be honest with you about something." His body tensed. "Okay. I'm attracted to you. Obviously. You're brilliant and kind and yes, objectively very attractive. But I'm also still healing from Michael. I'm still figuring out who I am outside of a relationship that nearly destroyed my sense of self-worth. I can't promise you anything serious right now. I can't promise you that I'm ready for whatever this is or might become." Albert relaxed. "Ruth, I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance to know you, a chance to see where this goes without expectations or timelines or pressure. Just possibility. Can you give me that?" Ruth thought about it. She thought about the safe choice, walking away, protecting her heart, avoiding the complications. She thought about Michael and how he'd made her feel like she was never enough. Then she thought about Albert's text. Whoever Michael is, he's an idiot. She thought about the way Albert had looked at her in the coffee shop, like she was the most interesting person in the world. She thought about possibility. "Yes," Ruth said. "I can give you that." Albert's smile was radiant. "Then that's all I need." As he left that night, walking down the stairs of her building instead of waiting for his driver to pick him up, because he wanted a few more minutes in her world, Ruth stood at her window and watched him go. She didn't know it then, but she'd just agreed to a journey that would test everything she believed about love, trust, and whether two people from completely different worlds could build something real together. And the first test was coming sooner than either of them expected. Veronica Chen was in her apartment in Paris when she saw the photos of Albert with Ruth. She was supposed to be over him. It had been 5 years, after all. She'd moved on. She'd dated actors and athletes and entrepreneurs. She'd told herself that losing Albert was the best thing that ever happened to her because it freed her to live the life she really wanted. But seeing him smile at another woman, seeing him look at Ruth Martinez the way Veronica had always wanted him to look at her, really look at her, not the performance she'd been putting on, ignited something ugly and desperate inside her chest. Veronica Chen didn't lose. She especially didn't lose to a social worker from Brooklyn who shopped at thrift stores. She booked a flight to New York that same day. 3 days later, Veronica walked into Albert's office building like she still belonged there. She'd maintained relationships with several of his employees over the years. People who remembered her as the glamorous fiancée and felt sorry for her when things ended. People who told her things about Albert's schedule, his meetings, his life. People like Margaret, his longtime executive assistant. Veronica, Margaret said, her voice carefully neutral. I didn't know you were in town. Surprise visit, Veronica said with a dazzling smile. I was hoping to catch up with Albert. For old time's sake. Is he available? Margaret hesitated. She knew this was a bad idea. She'd seen how happy Albert had been lately, how he'd been leaving the office at reasonable hours for the first time in years, how he'd been smiling at his phone like a teenager with his first crush. But Veronica had always been persuasive. And Margaret had always had a soft spot for second chances. He has 15 minutes before his next meeting, Margaret said. I'll let him know you're here. When Albert's office door opened and he saw Veronica standing there, his first instinct was to ask Margaret to remove her from the building. His second instinct was to wonder what game she was playing. He went with a third option, cold professionalism. Veronica, this is unexpected. Hello, Albert. She moved into his office like she owned it, her designer dress and expensive perfume a stark contrast to Ruth's thrift store finds and simple beauty. You look well. Success continues to suit you. What do you want? Albert asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Veronica's smile faltered slightly. Can't a woman visit an old friend? We are not friends, Veronica. We haven't been anything for 5 years. Not since I discovered you were using me for my money. Is that what you think? Veronica asked, and to Albert's surprise, her eyes glistened with tears. Albert, I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. I was young and stupid and scared. But I've spent 5 years regretting what I said, how I hurt you. I've spent 5 years wanting to apologize, to explain. There's nothing to explain, Albert interrupted. You made your feelings very clear. Or rather, your lack of feelings. I was lying. Veronica exclaimed. To my friend, to myself, maybe even to you. I was protecting myself because I was terrified of how much I actually loved you. When you made all that money, when you became this icon, this untouchable figure, I felt like I was losing you. Like I wasn't enough for this new version of you. So I convinced myself I was just in it for the money because that was easier than admitting I was scared of being abandoned. Albert stared at her. It was a good performance. Really good. For a moment, just a moment, he almost believed her. Then he thought about Ruth, about her honesty, about how she'd never made him guess at her feelings or intentions. Even if any of that were true, Albert said quietly, it doesn't change the past. It doesn't change what you said, what you did. And it certainly doesn't change the fact that I've moved on. With her. Veronica's mask cracked slightly, revealing something sharp underneath. With that girl I saw in the photos? Albert, come on. You and I both know she's not right for you. She's from a completely different world. She'll never understand your life, your responsibilities, the pressure of being who you are. You're right, Albert said, and Veronica's face lit up with hope. She is from a different world. She's from the real world. The world where people say what they mean and mean what they say. The world where relationships aren't transactions. The world where someone can care about you without calculating what they'll gain from it. Veronica's expression hardened. You think she's any different? Albert, wake up. You're a billionaire. Every woman you meet is calculating what you can give them. At least I was honest about it, eventually. No, Albert said. You were honest about being dishonest. There's a difference. He moved toward the door. This conversation is over. Margaret will see you out. She'll hurt you, Veronica said as he opened the door. That girl, Ruth, whatever her name is, she'll hurt you worse than I ever could, because you'll actually care when she does. And when it happens, when she shows her true colors, I'll be waiting. Albert turned back to her, and his voice was ice. Then you'll be waiting a long time. Goodbye, Veronica. After Veronica left, Albert sat at his desk for a long moment, his hand shaking. He pulled out his phone and looked at his last conversation with Ruth, a selfie she'd sent him that morning from the youth center, covered in finger paint from an art project with the kids, her smile genuine and bright. He started typing. Had an unexpected visitor today. My ex-fiancé showed up trying to. He stopped. He didn't want to burden Ruth with this. She was already dealing with enough media attention, enough scrutiny. She didn't need his drama added to it. But then he remembered what Ruth had said. If we are doing this, we do it as equals. Equals meant honesty. Equals meant trust. Equals meant not protecting each other from the truth. He finished the message. My ex-fiancé showed up trying to get back together. I turned her down. But I thought you should know. No secrets between us. That's the deal, right? Ruth's response came 3 minutes later. Thank you for telling me. Are you okay? That simple question, are you okay? Not are we okay, or should I be worried? But genuine concern for him, for how he felt, reminded Albert why he was falling for this woman. I'm better than okay, he typed back. I'm reminded of why I'm with someone real instead of someone pretending. Smooth talker, Ruth replied, followed by a heart emoji. But I'll take it. Want to come over for dinner tonight? I'm making pasta. Fair warning, my culinary skills are mediocre at best. I'd love to, Albert typed. I'll bring wine. Not the expensive stuff, Ruth wrote. Remember our deal. Albert smiled. How about I bring something moderately priced and you can judge whether it's worth the cost? Deal, Ruth replied. What neither of them knew was that Veronica had not left the building. She'd gone to the parking garage and was sitting in her rental car, making calls to every gossip columnist and celebrity reporter she still had in her contacts. I have a story for you, she said into her phone, about Albert James and his new girlfriend, about who she really is, what she's really after, and why this whole romance is nothing but a gold-digging scheme. Interested? The reporter on the other end was very interested indeed. The article dropped 3 days later on one of the internet's most notorious gossip sites. Exposed, the truth about Albert James's girlfriend Ruth Martinez, financial troubles, desperate situation, and a convenient wrong number romance. Ruth was at work when Jessica called her, screaming into the phone so incoherently that Ruth had to ask her to slow down 3 times before she understood what was happening. Someone had dug into her past. Deep. The article laid out every financial struggle Ruth had ever had. Her student loan debt, $67,000, her maxed-out credit cards, 3 of them, totaling $23,000, her overdue rent payments, her parents' medical bills that she'd been helping to pay, her car that had been repossessed 2 years ago. But it didn't stop at facts. It wove a narrative that Ruth had deliberately sent that text to Albert, that she'd researched him and targeted him, that the wrong number had been anything but wrong. It had been calculated, a scheme by a desperate woman to land a wealthy man. The article included expert analysis from a relationship psychologist who'd never met Ruth. This type of orchestrated meet-cute is more common than people think. Women in financial distress sometimes engage in what we call strategic vulnerability, presenting themselves as wounded and in need of rescuing to attract wealthy, powerful men with savior complexes. There were interviews with anonymous sources, friends of Ruth who claimed she'd always been money-obsessed and status-conscious. Ruth recognized the quotes. They weren't from friends but from co-workers at her old job who'd been jealous when she'd gotten promoted. The article had twisted their petty comments into something sinister. The comment section was even more vicious than before. I knew she was a gold digger. Nobody gets that lucky by accident. She's $90,000 in debt and accidentally texts a billionaire? Sure. January. Albert James is being played. Someone needs to warn him. She probably Googled how to trap a rich man and followed the instructions step by step. Ruth stood in the youth center's bathroom, staring at her phone, feeling like the walls were closing in. She'd worked so hard to build a life of integrity, to be someone her parents could be proud of, to make a difference in her community. And now, with one article, all of that was being reduced to a caricature of a gold-digging opportunist. Her phone rang. Albert. She didn't want to answer. She didn't want to hear whatever he was about to say, whether it was disappointment or doubt or the inevitable, we need to talk that preceded every breakup. But she'd promised honesty. She'd promised to face things together. Hello, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Where are you? Albert's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. At work. The youth center. Stay there. I'm coming to you. Albert, you don't have to. Stay there, he repeated, and hung up. 30 minutes later, Albert James walked into the youth center in Brooklyn. The teenagers stopped their activities to stare at the billionaire who just entered their space. The staff members exchanged shocked glances. Ruth's boss, Carmen, looked like she might faint. But Albert only had eyes for Ruth. He walked straight to her, and in front of everyone, he took her hands in his. Is any of it true? He asked quietly. The debt, the financial struggles. Ruth wanted to lie. She wanted to protect her pride, to pretend she had it all together. But that wasn't who she was. Yes, she said. All of it. I have student loans. I have credit card debt. I've been struggling to make ends meet while helping my parents with medical bills. I've been one emergency away from financial disaster for 3 years. And I didn't tell you because... She took a shaky breath. Because I was embarrassed. Because I didn't want you to think I was with you for your money. Because I wanted you to see me as your equal, even though our financial situations are universes apart. Albert was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Can we talk? Privately. Ruth led him to Carmen's office. Carmen had quickly vacated it when she realized what was happening. Albert closed the door behind them. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Would you have believed me? Ruth countered. If I'd said on our first coffee date, oh, by the way, I'm drowning in debt, but I swear I'm not interested in your money, would you have believed that? Or would you have thought exactly what everyone online is thinking right now, that I'm a gold digger who saw an opportunity and took it? Albert was silent because she had a point. I didn't tell you, Ruth continued, because my financial situation has nothing to do with how I feel about you. Yes, I'm struggling. Yes, my credit cards are maxed out. Yes, I cry sometimes when I look at my bank account. But that doesn't change the fact that when I'm with you, I forget about all of that. When I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. When I'm with you, I feel rich in all the ways that actually matter. She turned away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. But I understand if you can't trust that. I understand if this is too complicated, too public, too much. I'll walk away. I'll make it easy for you. Just, please know that what I felt for you was real. What I still feel for you is real. Albert moved behind her. She could feel his warmth, his presence, the way he made the air around her feel charged with possibility. Do you know what I did before I came here? He asked. Ruth shook her head. I had my legal team look into the article. The anonymous sources were people you haven't spoken to in years. The expert was paid by whoever commissioned the article. We are still tracking down who that was, but I have my suspicions. The photographer who took those pictures of us? They were tipped off about our coffee date before it even happened. This wasn't journalism, Ruth. This was a hit piece designed to destroy your reputation and drive us apart. He gently turned her around to face him. And do you know what gave it away? What made me absolutely certain that you're exactly who you say you are? What? Ruth whispered. The debt numbers were accurate. Every single one. Your student loans, your credit cards, your parents' medical bills, they got it all right. Which means they had access to your financial records, probably through illegal means. And do you know what those records showed? Ruth shook her head. That despite being $90,000 in debt, despite struggling to pay rent, despite barely scraping by month to month, you donate $50 every month to the youth center where you work. You've been donating that money for 3 years. Through breakups and financial crises and repo men taking your car, you still gave that money to kids who needed it more than you did. Albert's eyes were intense, burning with something Ruth couldn't quite name. A gold digger doesn't do that. Someone who's financially desperate and looking for a rescue doesn't do that. Someone who's playing a long con doesn't do that. You do that because you're fundamentally good. Because you care more about other people than you care about yourself. Because you're the kind of person who gives even when you have nothing to give. Tears were streaming down Ruth's face now. Albert. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone, Albert interrupted. When I was 14 years old and living in my fourth foster home, I stole $200 from my foster father's wallet. Not because I needed it. They fed me, clothed me, gave me shelter. I stole it because I wanted to buy the expensive sneakers the other kids at school had. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be somebody other than the poor orphan kid. He took a breath, and Ruth could see how much this confession cost him. I got caught. My foster father could have sent me to juvenile detention. Instead, he made me work off the debt. He made me volunteer at a homeless shelter for 2 months. He made me see people who were truly struggling, who would have given anything for the stability I took for granted. He taught me that who you are isn't defined by what you have, but by what you do when no one's watching. Albert cupped Ruth's face in his hands. You're the first person since then who's reminded me of that lesson. You're the first person who's made me feel like success isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch, the people you help, the goodness you put into the world. So no, I don't doubt you. I don't question your motives. I don't think you're with me for my money. I think I'm the lucky one. I think you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Ruth couldn't speak. She could only cry as Albert held her, as the weight of the world seemed to lift off her shoulders. I have a proposition, Albert said after a moment. A business proposition, if you will. Ruth pulled back, confused. What? Let me pay off your debt. Let me pay off your debt, Albert said. No, Ruth said immediately, stepping back. Absolutely not. That's exactly what. Let me finish, Albert interrupted gently. Let me pay off your debt, and you pay me back. With interest, if it makes you feel better. We'll draw up a legal contract. Market rate interest, manageable monthly payments based on your actual income. Think of me as a bank, not a boyfriend. The bank doesn't care about you. I do. But the terms will be identical to what you'd get from any financial institution, except I won't destroy your credit score if you're late on a payment because of an emergency. Ruth stared at him. Why would you do that? Because debt is a prison, Albert said quietly. I know. I've been there. Different circumstances, maybe, but I know what it's like to have that weight on your shoulders, to make every decision based on fear of financial ruin. I can't stand watching you carry that burden when I have the means to help. Not as your boyfriend. As your friend. As someone who cares about your well-being. This violates our deal, Ruth said. We agreed. We agreed you wouldn't be my charity case, Albert said. This isn't charity. This is a loan. A business transaction. You'll pay me back every penny. I'll even have my lawyers draw up the documents to make it official and legally binding. Ruth wanted to say no. Everything in her screamed to say no, to protect her pride, to prove she didn't need his money. But she thought about the youth center, about the kids she worked with who were drowning in circumstances beyond their control. She thought about what she always told them. Pride is important, but it shouldn't stop you from accepting help when you need it. There's no shame in struggling. The shame is in suffering alone when people are willing to help you. She'd given that speech 100 times. Maybe it was time to take her own advice. Market rate interest, Ruth said firmly. Legal documents. Monthly payment schedule based on my income. And if I'm even 1 day late, you charge me the late fee.
No exceptions, no boyfriend privileges.
Deal, Albert said, extending his hand. Ruth shook it. You're insane, you know that. I prefer strategically generous, Albert replied with a smile. Then his expression grew serious. But Ruth, there's something else we need to talk about. This article, this attack on your character, it's not going to stop. Whoever did this wants to drive us apart. They want to destroy your reputation. They want to make your life so miserable that you walk away from me. Do you know who it was? Ruth asked, though she already suspected the answer. I'm 90% certain it was Veronica, Albert said. I can't prove it yet, but the timing is too perfect. She showed up in my office 3 days ago trying to get back together. I turn her down, and suddenly there's a hit piece on you. My legal team is investigating, but these things take time. Ruth felt a cold anger settle in her chest. She'd been betrayed by Michael, judged by strangers online, and now she was being actively sabotaged by a woman she'd never even met. A woman who couldn't stand the thought of Albert moving on with someone she deemed unworthy. What do we do? Ruth asked. Albert pulled out his phone. We fight back. But not with lawyers or PR teams or carefully crafted statements. We fight back by living our truth. By showing the world exactly who you are. How? By letting them see the work you do. The kids you help. The life you've built. By showing them that you're not some opportunistic gold digger, but a woman of substance who was making a difference long before I came into your life. He looked at her intensely. Ruth, I want to do a profile piece. You and me, interview style, for a reputable journalist. We tell our story, the real story. We control the narrative. Ruth's stomach clenched. Albert, I don't know if I can handle more attention. More scrutiny. I know, Albert said. And if you say no, I'll respect that. We'll find another way. But I think the best way to fight lies is with truth. The best way to fight a distorted narrative is with the real story. Ruth thought about the kids at the youth center, about how they looked at her like she was someone worth admiring, about how this scandal might affect her ability to work with them, to be the role model they needed. Okay, she said. We do the interview. But I have conditions. Name them. We do it at the youth center. The journalist sees my real life, my real work. We don't stage anything or make it look better than it is. And we talk about the debt, about the struggles, about everything.
No hiding, no spin.
If we are going to tell our story, we tell the whole story. Albert smiled. You're remarkable. Anyone ever tell you that? You might have mentioned it once or twice, Ruth said, and despite everything, despite the article, despite the hate, despite the fear, she smiled back. 2 weeks later, renowned journalist Patricia Morrison walked into the Brooklyn Youth Center where Ruth worked. Patricia was known for her fair but unflinching interviews. She'd interviewed presidents and celebrities, activists, and criminals. She had a reputation for finding the truth, whatever it was. Albert had specifically requested her because she couldn't be bought, couldn't be influenced, and wouldn't soften her questions to make them look good. If we are doing this, Albert had said, we are doing it right. No puff piece. The real thing. The interview took place over 6 hours. Patricia watched Ruth work with the kids, 15 teenagers from underprivileged backgrounds, many of them dealing with family trauma, poverty, violence in their neighborhoods. She watched how Ruth listened to a 16-year-old boy talk about his father's recent incarceration, how she encouraged a 14-year-old girl working on a college essay, how she broke up a fight between 2 boys and turned it into a teaching moment about conflict resolution. Patricia interviewed the kids themselves. Miss Ruth is the only adult who ever believed I could go to college, said Marcus, 17, who was planning to major in engineering at CUNY. She helped my family when we were about to get evicted, said Destiny, 15. She called organizations, helped us fill out paperwork for assistance, stayed with us at the housing court. She didn't have to do that. That's just who she is. When everyone else gave up on me, Miss Ruth didn't, said James, 16, who'd been in juvenile detention twice before Ruth started mentoring him. She's the reason I'm graduating high school instead of being in jail. Then Patricia interviewed Ruth and Albert together. She didn't hold back. Ruth, let's address the elephant in the room. You're $90,000 in debt. Albert is worth $8.7 billion. How do you expect people to believe this relationship isn't financially motivated? Ruth met her gaze steadily. I don't expect people to believe anything. People are going to think whatever they want to think. But I know my truth. I know that I was making it work, barely, but I was making it work, before Albert came into my life. I know that I didn't ask him for money, didn't hint for money, didn't need him to rescue me. Yes, I'm struggling. But struggle doesn't equal desperation, and it certainly doesn't equal dishonesty. But you did accept his help, Patricia pressed. He paid off your debt. He gave me a loan, Ruth corrected. With interest, with a legal contract, with payment terms. I'm paying him back every month. That's not a handout. That's not being rescued. That's accepting help from someone who cares about you, the same way I'd accept a loan from a bank. Some would argue it's not the same at all. Those people have never been in debt. Ruth said flatly. They've never known what it's like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. They've never felt their chest tighten when they see a bill marked final notice. They've never had to tell their parents you can't help with their medication this month because you're 3 days away from eviction. So forgive me if I don't particularly care what those people think about my choices. Patricia turned to Albert. And you? Why involve yourself in her financial situation? Surely you must see how it looks. I see exactly how it looks, Albert replied. And I don't care. Ruth is the first genuine person I've met in years. The first person who sees me as a human being instead of a walking bank account. If helping her get out from under crushing debt means people judge me, judge us, so be it. I'd rather be judged for caring about someone than praised for being cold and detached. Your ex-fiancée, Veronica Chen, has been spotted in New York recently, Patricia said. Rumor has it she's not happy about your new relationship. Some speculate she may have been involved in the article that exposed Ruth's financial troubles. Any comment? Albert's jaw tightened. I have no proof of Veronica's involvement, so I won't make accusations. What I will say is this. 5 years ago, I learned a painful lesson about the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you can provide. Veronica taught me to be skeptical, to question motives, to protect myself. For years, that skepticism kept me safe but also kept me isolated. Ruth taught me that not everyone has an agenda. Some people are just good. Fundamentally, inherently good. And I'm not going to let past pain prevent me from recognizing present happiness. Patricia interviewed them separately after that. She asked Ruth about her childhood, her parents' immigrant story, her education, her ex-boyfriend Michael. She asked Albert about his foster care experience, building his company from nothing, the isolation of wealth, his previous relationship. Then she asked the question that would become the headline, do you love each other? Ruth answered first, I'm falling in love with him. I'm terrified of it, because love has hurt me before. Because I'm not sure someone like me gets to be with someone like him and have it actually work out. But yes, I'm falling. And for the first time in my life, I'm letting myself fall without trying to catch myself. Albert's answer was simpler. Yes. I love her. Completely. Irrevocably. In a way I didn't think I was capable of anymore. The article ran a week later in The Atlantic with the headline, The Billionaire and the Social Worker, a love story that challenges everything we think about wealth, class, and genuine connection. It was extensive, thoughtful, and fair. Patricia included the criticisms and skepticism but balanced them with the evidence of Ruth's character, her work, her sacrifices, the testimonials from the kids whose lives she changed. She included expert commentary on the challenges of cross-class relationships, but also on the genuine chemistry and connection visible between Ruth and Albert. The article went viral, but this time the response was different. The comment sections were still divided, but many people began to see Ruth as a real person rather than a caricature. After reading this, I'm ashamed of how quickly I judged her. She's clearly devoted to helping others. The fact that she was donating money to the youth center while drowning in debt says everything about her character. Whether or not this relationship lasts, she's clearly not the gold digger people made her out to be. Of course, the skeptics remained. Good PR can make anyone look good. This proves nothing. But something had shifted. The narrative had changed. Ruth was no longer just the woman who trapped a billionaire. She was Ruth Martinez, social worker, mentor, and a woman with her own story, her own struggles, her own worth that had nothing to do with the man she was dating. But Veronica Chen wasn't finished. The Atlantic article had been a setback, but not a defeat. If anything, it had made Veronica more determined. She'd invested too much time, too much money. The hit piece article had cost her $50,000 in bribes and payments to sources, and too much pride to give up now. If she couldn't destroy Ruth's reputation, she'd destroy the relationship itself. Veronica had resources, money, connections, and a complete lack of moral boundaries when it came to getting what she wanted. She hired a private investigator to follow Ruth, looking for any misstep, any moment of weakness, any evidence that could be twisted into proof of ulterior motives. For 3 weeks, the investigator found nothing. Ruth went to work, went home, occasionally met friends for coffee or dinner. She and Albert saw each other several times a week, sometimes at his penthouse, sometimes at her apartment, sometimes at restaurants or museums or walks in Central Park. They looked like what they were, two people falling in love. That's when Veronica changed tactics. She couldn't find dirt on Ruth, so she'd create it. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Veronica would arrange for Ruth to receive what appeared to be financial gifts from Albert, expensive jewelry, designer clothes, even a transfer of $100,000 to Ruth's bank account, all without Ruth's knowledge or consent. Then she'd tip off the media about these gifts, painting Ruth as someone who was indeed taking advantage of Albert's wealth despite her public claims otherwise. The only problem was executing the plan without getting caught. Veronica started by hacking into Albert's email. She'd set up the account years ago when they were together and still knew the recovery information. She created emails from Albert to various luxury retailers, arranging for items to be sent to Ruth's address. A $15,000 Cartier bracelet, a $8,000 Gucci handbag, a $20,000 set of designer luggage. Then she worked on the biggest piece, the bank transfer. This required more finesse. She couldn't directly access Albert's bank accounts, but she could create convincing forgeries of bank documents showing a transfer from his account to Ruth's. It wouldn't hold up to serious scrutiny, but it would be enough to plant seeds of doubt, to restart the narrative that Ruth was a gold digger. The packages started arriving at Ruth's apartment 3 days later. Ruth was confused when the first one showed up, a large box from Cartier. She hadn't ordered anything, and Albert knew better than to send her expensive gifts that violated their agreement. She opened it and found the bracelet with a note. "For my beautiful Ruth. You deserve to be adorned with beautiful things." Ruth immediately called Albert. "Did you send me a Cartier bracelet?" "What? No, of course not. We have a deal." "That's what I thought. But there's a bracelet here with a note that's supposedly from you." There was a pause. "Ruth, don't touch anything else. I'm sending my head of security to your apartment right now. Something's wrong." Over the next 2 hours, 3 more packages arrived. By the time Albert's security team showed up, Ruth's apartment looked like a luxury boutique had exploded inside it. "This is a setup," Thomas Griffin, Albert's head of security, said grimly. He was a former FBI agent who'd worked with Albert for 6 years. "Someone's trying to make it look like Mr. James is showering you with gifts." "But who would?" Ruth stopped. "Veronica." "We can't prove it yet," Thomas said. "But yes, that's our primary suspect. We are tracing the orders now, seeing who paid for them, where they originated." "What do I do with all this?" Ruth gestured at the thousands of dollars worth of merchandise surrounding her. "Nothing," Thomas said. "We are documenting everything, taking photos, collecting evidence. These items are going to be returned to the retailers with an explanation that they were sent fraudulently. And we are going to find out who's behind this." That night, Ruth couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like she was caught in a nightmare that kept getting worse no matter what she did. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check your bank account." Ruth's blood ran cold. She opened her banking app with shaking hands. There it was, a deposit of $100,000 from an account listed as A. James Personal. Ruth immediately screenshot it and sent it to Albert, her fingers trembling. "I just got $100,000 deposited in my account supposedly from you. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. Please tell me this is some kind of banking error." Albert called 30 seconds later. "I didn't send that. I'm looking at my accounts right now. There's no transfer to you. This is completely fabricated." "But it's in my account, Albert. The money is actually there." "That means someone hacked your account and deposited their own money to make it look like it came from me," Albert said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Thomas is already on his way back to you. Ruth, don't touch that money. Don't transfer it. Don't spend it. Don't do anything with it. It's evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Of whoever is trying to destroy us," Albert said. "And I'm going to find out who it is, and I'm going to make sure they face consequences." But it was too late to contain the damage. The next morning, photos of Ruth's apartment filled with luxury goods appeared on every gossip site and social media platform. The headline, "So much for it's not about the money," Ruth Martinez's apartment filled with $100,000 in gifts from billionaire boyfriend. Accompanying screenshots showed the bank deposit, the designer items, everything carefully documented to paint Ruth as a liar who'd been playing the public the whole time. The comments were brutal. I knew she was full of it. That whole humble social worker act was just that, an act. She really thought we'd believe she didn't want his money? Please. Albert James is a fool. She played him perfectly. Ruth called in sick to work. She couldn't face the kids knowing they might be seeing these articles, might be questioning whether everything she'd taught them about integrity was a lie. She was sitting on her floor, surrounded by boxes of designer goods she didn't want, when her apartment buzzer rang. It was Albert. She let him up, and when he walked through her door, she saw something she'd never seen before, Albert James completely enraged. I know who did it, he said without preamble. Veronica. We traced the purchases back to shell corporations, but we found security footage of her at one of the law firms that created those companies. We have her on camera. We have paper trails. We have evidence. What does that mean? Ruth asked. It means I'm going to destroy her, Albert said, his voice cold. She committed fraud, identity theft, possibly wire fraud. She's going to face criminal charges. She's going to.
No, Ruth interrupted.
Albert stared at her. What? No, Ruth repeated, standing up. You're not going to destroy her. Ruth, she tried to destroy you. She fabricated evidence, hacked accounts, committed multiple felonies. I know what she did, Ruth said. And you're right, it's horrible. It's cruel. It's criminal. But Albert, think about what happens if you go after her with everything you have. Think about the media circus, the trial, the endless months of this being dragged through the news. Think about how that affects the kids I work with, my family, my life. She can't be allowed to get away with this, Albert said. I'm not saying she gets away with it, Ruth replied. I'm saying we are smarter than revenge. We expose what she did, we clear my name, but we don't make this about destroying her. We make it about the truth. Albert looked at her like she'd lost her mind. You're too good for this world. You know that. Maybe, Ruth said with a sad smile. Or maybe I'm just tired of darkness creating more darkness. Maybe I want to be the person who chooses light even when I have every right to choose fire. Albert pulled her into his arms. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Ruth agreed, her voice muffled against his chest. But you're stuck with me anyway. They released a statement that afternoon through Albert's legal team, laying out exactly what had happened, the fraudulent purchases, the hacked bank account, the attempted frame job. They included evidence, security footage, bank records showing the actual source of the $100,000, a shell corporation traced back to Veronica, emails from the retailers confirming they'd been contacted by someone impersonating Albert. They also announced that while they had sufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges, they were choosing not to, instead asking only that Veronica cease all contact and harassment. We believe in second chances, the statement read. We believe that people can choose to be better than their worst moments. We're extending that grace to Ms. Chen and hoping she takes this opportunity to move forward with her life while allowing us to do the same with ours. The response was mixed. Some people thought they were being weak, that Veronica should face consequences. Others admired their restraint and grace under fire. But one person was absolutely infuriated by the statement, Veronica Chen herself, because she didn't want grace. She didn't want to be forgiven. She wanted to fight until one of them was completely destroyed. And if Albert and Ruth wouldn't fight back, she'd have to escalate even further. Veronica showed up at the youth center 3 days later. Ruth was in the middle of leading a college prep workshop when Carmen came to the door, her face pale. Ruth, there's someone here to see you, Carmen said quietly. She says it's urgent. Ruth stepped into the hallway and found herself face to face with Veronica Chen for the first time. She was beautiful. Ruth had seen photos, but they didn't capture the reality of Veronica's polished perfection. Designer clothes, flawless makeup, the kind of effortless elegance that came from a lifetime of wealth and privilege. Ruth Martinez, Veronica said, looking her up and down with barely concealed disdain. Finally, I wanted to meet the woman who thinks she can take what's mine. I'm in the middle of a workshop, Ruth said evenly. If you want to talk, you'll have to wait, or we can schedule. I'm not scheduling anything, Veronica interrupted. We are talking now. Ruth felt anger flare in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. Fine. My office. 5 minutes. And then you leave. They walked to Ruth's tiny office, barely more than a closet with a desk, and Veronica looked around with obvious disgust. This is where you work. How quaint. What do you want, Veronica? Ruth asked, crossing her arms. I want you to walk away from Albert, Veronica said bluntly. I want you to end this little performance, admit that you were using him, and disappear from his life. That's not going to happen. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Veronica said, her voice sharp. You think this is some fairy tale? Poor girl meets rich prince and they live happily ever after? That's not how the world works. You're going to get hurt. Albert is going to realize you're not enough for him, not sophisticated enough, not worldly enough, not polished enough. And when he does, he's going to break your heart in ways you can't even imagine. Is that what you tell yourself? Ruth asked quietly. That he left you because you weren't enough? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like he left you because you were dishonest, because you used him, because you were never genuine about your feelings. Veronica's face flushed with anger. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know he caught you on the phone laughing about how you'd hooked the biggest fish in the ocean, Ruth said. I know you were using him for his money while pretending to love him. I know you broke his trust in ways that took him 5 years to heal from. So yes, Veronica, I think I know enough. At least I was honest about what his world requires, Veronica shot back. At least I understood that being with someone like Albert means playing a part, meeting certain expectations, fitting into a lifestyle. You think you can show up in your thrift store dresses and your poverty mindset and be enough for him? You're embarrassing him. You're embarrassing yourself. Ruth felt something inside her snap. Not into anger, but into clarity. You're right, Ruth said, and Veronica looked surprised. I can't give Albert what you could give him. I can't be his trophy on a red carpet. I can't discuss wine vintages or vacation in the Hamptons, or make small talk at galas with people whose annual clothing budget is more than I make in a year. You're absolutely right that I don't fit into his world. She took a step closer to Veronica. But here's what you're missing. Albert doesn't want to live in that world anymore. He's been living in it alone, surrounded by people who see him as a transaction rather than a person. He's been suffocating in a life of superficial perfection. And when he met me, when he accidentally met me through a misdirected text, he found something he didn't even know he was missing. Someone who sees him. Really sees him. Not his money, not his status, not what he can provide. Just him. That won't last, Veronica said, but her voice was less certain now. Eventually, reality will set in. Eventually, he'll miss his life, and you'll be holding him back. Maybe, Ruth acknowledged. Maybe you're right. Maybe this doesn't last. Maybe we are too different, too incompatible, too unlikely. But at least what we have is real. At least when he looks at me, he knows I'm not calculating what I can get from him. At least when I tell him I love him, he knows I mean it. Can you say the same? Veronica's composure cracked. I did love him. I do love him. Why do you think I'm fighting so hard to get him back? No, Ruth said gently. You love what he represents. You love the life he can provide. You love the status and security and luxury. But love, real love, means seeing someone's flaws and loving them anyway. It means supporting their happiness even when it means letting them go. It means wanting what's best for them, not what's best for you. Veronica's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Ruth saw past the polished exterior to the broken woman underneath. He was supposed to be mine, Veronica whispered. I was supposed to be the one. You had your chance, Ruth said, and you made your choices. Now you have to let him make his. I can't, Veronica said. I can't watch him be happy with someone else when She stopped, wiping her eyes. You don't understand. I've spent 5 years trying to prove I was wrong about him, trying to find someone better, someone who could make me feel the way he did. And no one does. No one ever does. Ruth felt something unexpected, compassion, because she understood regret. She understood the pain of realizing you destroyed something precious and couldn't get it back. Veronica, Ruth said quietly, you need to talk to someone. Not me, not Albert, but a therapist. Someone who can help you process this, help you heal, help you move forward. Because this, stalking him, sabotaging his relationships, trying to force something that's over, this isn't love. This is obsession. And it's destroying you. Don't pretend to care about me, Veronica said bitterly. I'm not pretending, Ruth replied. I feel sorry for you. You had something real with Albert, or at least the potential for something real, and you threw it away because you were too scared to be vulnerable. Now you're stuck in this cycle of regret and revenge, and it's eating you alive. You deserve better than that. Even if you don't believe it, you deserve better. Veronica stared at her, and Ruth saw something shift in her expression. Not acceptance, necessarily, but a crack in the armor. A moment of recognition. Why are you being nice to me? Veronica asked. I tried to destroy you. Because someone has to break the cycle, Ruth said. And I'm choosing for it to be me. Veronica was silent for a long moment. Then she said, he really loves you, doesn't he? Yes, Ruth said simply. And I really love him. Then you're luckier than you know, Veronica said quietly. Don't screw it up the way I did. She turned and walked out of the office, out of the youth center, and, though Ruth didn't know it then, out of their lives for good. Ruth stood in her office for a long time after Veronica left, her hands shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. Then she pulled out her phone and texted Albert, your ex came to see me. We talked. I think it's over. I think she's finally letting go. His response was immediate. Are you okay? Did she hurt you? Do I need to? Ruth smiled as she typed back, I'm fine. She's not fine, but she will be. Come over tonight? I need to see you. I'll be there, Albert replied. 2 months passed. Life began to settle into a new normal. The media attention didn't disappear entirely. It never would, but it faded to background noise. Ruth continued working at the youth center. Albert continued running his company. They saw each other several times a week, building something real and lasting in the spaces between their very different lives. Then Albert asked Ruth to attend a charity gala with him. It's for a cause I care deeply about, he explained over dinner at her apartment. He'd brought Thai food. She provided mismatched plates and a tablecloth with a wine stain. Children's education initiatives, specifically funding programs for kids in foster care. It's personal, and I'd really like you there. Ruth's stomach clenched. She'd successfully avoided Albert's world so far, the galas and charity events and high society gatherings. She'd told herself it was because she was busy, because she didn't have the right clothes, because she didn't fit in that environment. The truth was she was terrified. Albert, I don't know if I'm ready for that. All those people, all that judgment. I know it's scary, Albert interrupted gently. I know you'll be uncomfortable. I know people will stare and whisper and judge. But Ruth, you're important to me. This cause is important to me. And I want the world to see us together, really together, not hiding or pretending we are something we are not. Ruth thought about the kids at the youth center, about how she always encouraged them to be brave, to step outside their comfort zones, to not let fear dictate their choices. Okay, she said. I'll go. But I'm wearing whatever I can find that's appropriate, and I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I wouldn't want you to, Albert said, kissing her forehead. The gala was in 2 weeks. Ruth borrowed a dress from Jessica, a simple black gown that was elegant without being ostentatious. She did her own makeup, wore her grandmother's pearl necklace, and stood in front of the mirror trying to convince herself she looked like she belonged at a high society event. You look beautiful, Albert said when he picked her up. He was in a tuxedo, looking like he'd stepped off the cover of GQ, and Ruth felt the familiar wave of what am I doing with this man wash over her. I look terrified, Ruth corrected. You look beautiful and terrified, Albert said with a smile. The terrified part is temporary. The beautiful part is permanent. The gala was held at the Plaza Hotel. As Ruth and Albert walked in together, she felt hundreds of eyes turn toward them. She heard the whispers, saw the phones being raised for photos, felt the weight of judgment from every direction. Albert felt her tense beside him. He leaned down and whispered, "Remember, every single person in this room has insecurities. They're just better at hiding them." The evening was excruciating. Ruth made conversation with people who clearly looked down on her, who asked pointed questions about her work in a tone that suggested they found it quaint and unimportant. She smiled through passive-aggressive comments. How refreshing that Albert has chosen someone so authentic, and outright rude ones must be quite an adjustment dating someone of Albert's caliber. She was in the bathroom, taking a moment to breathe, when she overheard two women talking at the mirror. I don't know what Albert sees in her. She's so ordinary. Money, obviously. Did you see that article about her debt? She's probably the best investment he's ever made. She'll be grateful forever. Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. She wanted to leave. She wanted to run out of this hotel and never look back. She wanted to be anywhere but here, surrounded by people who would never accept her. Then she heard a third voice, sharp and commanding. That's enough. Ruth looked up and saw an elderly woman in an elegant emerald gown. She had to be in her 70s, but she carried herself with the authority of royalty. The two gossiping women blanched. Mrs. Pemberton, we were just. You were being cruel and small-minded, Mrs. Pemberton interrupted. Two things I have no patience for. Now leave. And pray, I don't mention your behavior to your husbands, both of whom depend on my family's investment firm for their livelihoods. The women practically fled. Mrs. Pemberton turned to Ruth, who was still frozen by the sink. You're Ruth Martinez, correct? Albert's girlfriend. Yes, Ruth managed. Good. I wanted to meet you. Mrs. Pemberton held out her hand. Catherine Pemberton. My family has known the Jameses for 3 generations. I knew Albert when he was a frightened boy in foster care, and I've watched him become the man he is today. Ruth shook her hand, confused about where this was going. I've been to 100 of these galas, Mrs. Pemberton continued. I've seen Albert attend with models and actresses and socialites. And do you know what I never saw? I never saw him smile the way he smiles when he looks at you. I never saw him relax. I never saw him seem happy. Mrs. Pemberton. Let me finish, dear. These people, she gestured vaguely toward the bathroom door, they don't matter. They're going. Mrs. Pemberton smiled warmly. These people, they don't matter. They're going to talk regardless of what you do. What matters is this. Do you love him? And does he love you? Yes, Ruth said without hesitation. To both. Then hold your head high and walk back out there like you own the place. Because the woman who captured Albert James's heart, she owns more than any of them ever will. Ruth returned to the ballroom with new resolve. When someone made a snide comment, she responded with grace. When someone questioned her background, she spoke proudly about her work. When someone implied she didn't belong, she simply smiled and said, You're probably right. But I'm here anyway. Albert watched her navigate the room with growing admiration. This woman, his woman, was facing down an army of judgment with nothing but authenticity and courage. As the evening wound down, Albert stood to give his speech about the charity. But instead of the prepared remarks about foster care funding, he went off script. I want to tell you about someone, Albert said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Someone who changed my life. Someone who reminded me what really matters. Ruth's heart began to race as she realized he was looking directly at her. Her name is Ruth Martinez. Most of you have met her tonight, some of you have judged her, and all of you have probably wondered what someone like me is doing with someone like her. He paused. I wondered that too. What is someone as extraordinary as Ruth doing with someone as damaged as me? A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Ruth works with at-risk youth in Brooklyn. She makes $42,000 a year. She was $90,000 in debt when I met her, and she was still donating money every month to the kids she works with. She doesn't own designer clothes or expensive jewelry. She's never been to the Hamptons. She can't tell a Bordeaux from a Burgundy. Ruth felt her face burning, but Albert's eyes held hers, full of love. And she's the richest person I've ever met. Because Ruth measures wealth in lives changed, in kids saved, in moments of genuine human connection. She's taught me that success isn't about how much you accumulate, but how much you give. That love isn't a transaction, it's a choice you make every single day. Albert descended from the stage and walked directly to Ruth. The entire ballroom held its breath. Ruth Martinez, I love you. I love your thrift store dresses and your tiny apartment and your refusal to let me spoil you. I love that you see me, really see me, not my money or my status. I love that you make me want to be better, do better, live better. He dropped to one knee, and Ruth's hands flew to her mouth. I wasn't planning this tonight, Albert said, pulling out a simple ring. Not the massive diamond she'd expected, but a delicate band with a small, perfect stone. I bought this 2 weeks ago and I've been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. But watching you tonight, watching you be brave and authentic and completely yourself in a room full of people who don't deserve you, I realize there's no perfect moment. There's only now. There's only us. Tears streamed down Ruth's face. Ruth Martinez, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me? Not the life people expect us to have, but the life we want? Where we order takeout and watch movies and argue about whether to donate money or invest it. Where we figure out together what it means to use wealth as a tool for good instead of a measure of worth. Ruth looked at this man kneeling before her, this brilliant, broken, beautiful man who'd chosen her out of everyone in the world. She thought about all the reasons to say no, the media scrutiny, the cultural differences, the constant judgment, the challenges of merging two impossibly different lives. Then she thought about the way he made her laugh, the way he listened when she talked about her work, the way he held her when she cried, the way he saw her not as a charity case or a status symbol, but as an equal partner in building something meaningful. Yes, Ruth said, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. The ballroom erupted in applause as Albert slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply. Some people clapped genuinely, moved by the moment. Others clapped politely while internally seething. Ruth didn't care anymore. She'd found something precious and rare, a love built on truth, not pretense. A partnership based on respect, not rescue. A future full of possibility, not perfection. 2 years later, Ruth stood in the renovated community center, no longer just a youth center, but a comprehensive resource facility for at-risk families. It had been funded by the James Tech Foundation and now offered education programs, job training, mental health services, and legal aid. Miss Ruth. Marcus called out. He was home from his second year at MIT, where he was studying engineering on a full scholarship. Come see the new computer lab. Ruth followed him, her simple wedding band catching the light. She and Albert had married in a small ceremony at the youth center, surrounded by kids and family and the people who truly mattered. The photos had been beautiful, not because of expensive flowers or designer dresses, but because of the genuine joy on everyone's faces. Albert appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie after a board meeting. Even after 2 years of marriage, Ruth's heart still skipped when she saw him. How was the meeting? She asked. Productive. We are expanding the education initiative to 12 more cities. He kissed her forehead. How's your day? Perfect. Marcus is showing off. Destiny got accepted to Columbia. James got his first job. It's a good day. Every day with you is a good day, Albert said. Ruth rolled her eyes. Still cheesy after all this time. Still true after all this time, he countered. They'd found their rhythm. Living in a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, Albert had sold his penthouse, claiming he preferred their actual home to his museum. They'd navigated countless challenges, merging finances, dealing with ongoing media attention, learning to communicate across cultural differences, figuring out how to use Albert's wealth in ways that aligned with their shared values. It wasn't always easy. They argued about money. Ruth still struggled to accept help. Albert still wanted to give more than she was comfortable receiving. They compromised, negotiated, occasionally went to bed angry and woke up ready to try again. But it was real. Messy, complicated, imperfect, and completely real. Ruth's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. For a moment, her heart clenched. remembering that first misdirected text 2 years ago. She opened it. I saw the article about the new community center. It's beautiful. You're doing amazing work. I'm sorry for everything, and I hope you're happy. Ruth showed it to Albert. He read it and raised an eyebrow. Veronica, should I be worried? No, Ruth said. I think she finally found peace. I hope she did. You're too good, Albert said, pulling her close. I'm just realistic, Ruth replied. Hurt people hurt people. Healed people heal people. She was hurting. Now maybe she's healing. As they walk home that evening, hand in hand through their Brooklyn neighborhood, Ruth thought about that desperate, heartbroken woman who texted the wrong number at 2:47 a.m. She'd been at her lowest point, certain her life was falling apart. She'd had no idea she was actually at the beginning of everything. Sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right number. Sometimes falling apart is how you fall together. Sometimes the person you least expect becomes the person you can't imagine living without. And sometimes, just sometimes, fairy tales happen to ordinary people who dare to believe in extraordinary love. Ruth squeezed Albert's hand. He squeezed back. They were home. A story about love transcending class, authenticity triumphing over judgment, and two people finding home in each other against all odds. Thank you so much for taking your precious time watching. Please, before you leave, don't forget to subscribe, like and comment where you are watching from.